When Indira Gandhi became Prime Minister of India, she set her country on a course of modernization through the development of science and technology. This film contains one of her last interviews before she was assassinated. For centuries, life in rural India was based on simple technologies: the ox cart, the pottery wheel, the spinning wheel. But now even the most remote Indian villages are about to be launched into the space age. In 1983, India's own telecommunications satellite was placed into orbit, and now television has come to rural India. This modern technology offers a window on a wider world. But what impact will television have on rural India? What benefit will the new communication technology bring? And at what cost? In villages all over India, a technological revolution is taking place, bringing to the countryside the futuristic hardware of the space age. In the dim light of evening, a new ritual begins. These men are the caretakers for the community television set. For the first time, people living in the most remote areas of India can have instant contact with the rest of the world. Through television, this small rural community has come to join the global village.
7, 6, 5, we have engine start, 2, 1, we have ignition and we have liftoff.
The launch of the American Space Shuttle Challenger in August of 1983 was of special interest to the people of India. Within Challenger's payload bay was India's own telecommunications satellite, built by Indian scientists in conjunction with Ford Aerospace. 2 decades in the planning, the satellite was designed to serve several purposes, ranging from forecasting the weather to improving the nation's telephone system. But the main function of the satellite, called INSAT, was to make television transmission possible in the widespread underdeveloped regions of India. INSAT stands for Indian National Satellite. In geostationary orbit, its speed exactly matches that of the Earth's rotation, which keeps INSAT permanently over the heart of India. It cost $130 million to design and build INSAT, a major financial commitment for a developing nation. But it cost only a fraction of the $1 trillion that would have been needed to build a completely ground-based telecommunications system. INSAT has transformed the landscape of India. The concept of a communications satellite was first put forward in 1945 by engineer and science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke.
Communications satellite enables us for the first time to send any type of communication, telephone, television, telex, anything you like to imagine, direct to any spot on the Earth's surface at any time of the day or night. This has never been possible before.
Arthur Clarke lives on the island of Sri Lanka off the southern tip of India. Through satellite-linked computers, he communicates instantly with the Hollywood-based producers working on his latest film, 2010. It is his belief that satellite-linked technologies can be of considerable use to developing countries.
Well, many developing countries have very little communications infrastructure at the ground level, you might say. The communication satellite will enable them to leapfrog a whole era of communications by making it possible to broadcast into particularly large developing countries, Africa, South America, every type of communication from a single satellite in space, thus doing away with billions of dollars worth of ground equipment which will now be unnecessary.
With his own dish aerial pointed at INSAT, Arthur Clarke often watches Indian television beamed from Delhi, 2,000 miles to the north.
The communication satellites, like the new Indian INSAT, which is operating now very well indeed, will for the first time give the whole continent of India really good telecommunications, which are absolutely essential, of course, for business, tourism, ordinary home life. And it's a quantum jump when a developing country gets this kind of communications. It transforms the whole society.
Around the turn of the century, Great Britain built roads and railways and set up a communications network linking the many regions of India. The system was designed to meet the needs of the British Empire and favored the cities. Although extensive, today the transportation system badly needs upgrading. Telephones were introduced in the 1880s. Exchanges are now run down and ground lines are inadequate. It is often easier to dial internationally than across town. Today, India's telephone system is reputedly among the worst in the world. Satellite telecommunications are intended to help India modernize its transportation and communications network. Since independence in 1947, India has worked to become a modern industrial society. Bombay, the richest city in India, is a prime example of the emphasis on urban development that goes hand in hand with progress. India has the world's second largest population, more than 700 million people. It is roughly the same size as Western Europe, with a similar number of constituent states. There are more than 6 different religions and more than 16 languages. This cultural diversity is a staggering challenge to the nation's communications system. India also has the largest middle class in the third world. But 300 million people live in poverty. Against the backdrop of their plight, millions of dollars have been spent on satellite communications. The government contends that the availability of information made possible by this new technology will narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. Still, immediate social needs must compete for funds with the costs of technological and urban development. It is in rural India, where 75% of the population lives, that satellite communication is expected to have its greatest impact. Although some villages are beginning to get electricity and reliable water sources, these people have been relatively untouched by modern development. The government maintains that satellite broadcast television is the only practical way to reach India's 700,000 villages, with information needed to overcome the poverty that has plagued the country for centuries. In 1966, Indira Gandhi was elected Prime Minister. She would rule for more than 15 years. In the first year of her administration, the country was torn by religious riots. Unparalleled drought and food shortages plunged the nation into a crisis. Millions of people died of starvation. Amidst this disaster, Gandhi continued a commitment to science and technology that was originally made by her father, Jawaharlal Nehru. Throughout her political career, Gandhi was fiercely determined to see her country become a world leader in science. She argued that scientific advancement was key to the long-term prosperity of the nation.
Well, why is India backward, economically backward today? Why is it poor? It's because we missed the Industrial Revolution. Now, if we miss what is happening now and the new advances in science, then we haven't got a ghost of a chance of making up for lost time.
Over the last decade, India has become a leader in science in the developing world. It is surpassed only by the United States and the Soviet Union in number of scientists. Last year, India opened its first factory for the production of microchips. The nation has also made impressive gains in the field of space science.
For a country like India, which is so vast in scale and with such a large population, such a diverse population, you do need something that will enable you to reach out to people. The remotest areas, the poorest sections of the people. And I think that we can do that through space.
In April of 1984, the INSAT telecommunications satellite transmitted pictures of India's first cosmonaut aboard the Soviet spacecraft Salyut 7. This exciting event was seen on television in cities and villages all over India. INSAT has put more than 70% of the country within the range of television signals.
For the success of your space journey, for a space-safe landing, and a joyous return home.
Television is INSAT's most controversial capability. Supporters see it as a tool to accelerate development. Detractors fear it will be used to promote government policies, and they contend that its educational potential will be eclipsed by its appeal as an entertainment medium. INSAT is the most ambitious telecommunications project to be undertaken by a third world country. In the year and a half that it has been in operation, more than 200 Earth satellite stations have been built. With INSAT, India has invested in a grand experiment to see if satellite telecommunications can provide a quantum jump into the future. The foundation for INSAT was laid in 1975 with the Satellite Instructional Television Program, or SITE. SITE was a one-year experiment in educational broadcasting. Television programs were beamed to villages via the U.S. satellite ATS-6. 2,400 villages in 6 different states were equipped with their own direct reception antenna and community television set.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll video.
नमस्कार, ये उपग्रह दूरदर्शन है। शाम के 6
In charge of the SITE project was Professor Yash Pal.
The SITE experiment was a unique experience, not only for people to whom the programs were transmitted, but also for all the people who were involved in it. It had technological dimensions, social dimensions, educational dimensions. In fact, it, in a sense, transformed our media.
As well as educational programs, SITE villages received for the first time news from the rest of India. The experiment was an engineering triumph, one of the world's first demonstrations of television reception direct from satellite. Many of the programs were geared toward regional interests. There were programs on agriculture, teacher training, and children's shows. This experiment was the first concrete expression of the Indian government's commitment to telecommunications, and it was used as proof that television could play a role in development. But SITE was a pilot project. Today, India has its own satellite. With INSAT, most of the country can receive television relayed from the satellite overhead. INSAT is a multi-purpose satellite. In addition to television broadcast capabilities, it contains 8,000 telephone circuits, which are working to alleviate telephone congestion. INSAT also provides a continuous picture of India's weather. This is the first time people all over India can see their country's weather patterns on the nightly news. These pictures show the snow cover on the Himalayas. The Himalayas are the highest mountains in the world. INSAT pictures showing a dramatic change in snow cover can help scientists determine where runoff is expected. This information is used to predict floods. When the snow melts, it brings rivers of water to the valleys and plains of northern India, one of the world's most fertile growing areas. The monsoon rains that come every summer compound the hazard of floods, bringing to India more rainfall in 4 months than England gets in 5 years. In the disastrous flood of 1978, millions of people were left homeless. Thousands were killed. INSAT can be used not only to help predict such disasters, but also to instantly send warning to villages. Computer-enhanced INSAT pictures also help scientists understand complex weather patterns, such as this destructive cyclone. INSAT transmits a picture of weather activity every half hour. This information can provide 12 to 24 hours notice of an approaching cyclone. Government offices are also making use of INSAT's telecommunication channels. Bureaucrats who coordinate programs that link national and regional offices have long depended on thick files from field workers to obtain information. Now, satellite-linked computers have been introduced to cut down on paperwork and streamline administration. More than 1 million tourists visit India every year. The Department of Tourism is working to improve facilities in order to attract more visitors. Already, many of the larger hotels have installed computers that will soon be linked nationwide by INSAT. It is hoped that this kind of booking office chaos will become obsolete. Both the national railways and airlines are introducing satellite-linked computers to help the transportation systems run on time and cope with the huge volume of travelers. The Ministry of Commerce computer is already online. It will eventually be connected via INSAT with computers in regional offices. Most computers now are imported, but India is rapidly developing its own computer industry. But INSAT's primary function in rural India is broadcast television. This is the Secunderabad Earth Station near Delhi, a major link-up for INSAT telecommunications, and it is the main one for radio and television broadcasts. An educational program for school children is transmitted from here to villages all over India. Half of the educational programs are produced in Delhi. The rest are made by regional stations of the Indian Broadcasting Service. There are also plans to use INSAT for adult education and to create a university of the air. Educational programs are targeted initially at 6 different rural states. In parts of these, like western Andhra Pradesh, hundreds of villages have been supplied with their own TV set and dish aerial. A typical INSAT village is Manikonda. The satellite receiver is located by the school building, which also houses the community TV. Education in India is an enormous challenge. 3 in 4 are illiterate, more than 400 million people. 3/4 of all children never go to school at all or drop out before they are 12 years old. In rural areas, contact with the outside world is rare, and books and equipment are in short supply. There are now 25,000 television sets in these rural villages that are intended to help compensate for the lack of other educational resources. Classes now get 1.5 hours of educational television a day. A satellite reception set for a village costs nearly $3,000. Even the educational use of television has its critics, who ask whether this is the best use of available funds in the face of shortages of teachers and facilities throughout India. The Director of Educational Communications at the Space Research Organization, Kiran Karnik, responds.
Now, we look on TV as playing two roles. One very important role with the TV in the school, you may not call it ETV, but it's using the TV in the school, is to use it for teacher training and to get together groups of teachers who can then be trained and therefore act as a multiplier. But even when not used in that role, the reality of the situation in India is that we will never have, in the foreseeable future, enough number of trained and highly qualified teachers to take care of the kind of primary school population one is talking of. And therefore, one has to look necessarily for other means of playing this role.
We have a lot of people in the villages. We have 400 million people who are illiterate. We have 140 million in schools. We need to build a school every 5 minutes in order to keep our people in school. So from our point of view, communication has to be used to work for all our developmental programs. So communication is not a luxury.
Two classes at the Manikonda school are permanently taught out of doors, even in the rainy season. Of India's 500,000 schools, 2/3 have no school buildings at all. In addition, 1/3 are either one-teacher schools or are at times simply unstaffed. Some critics argue that teachers, buildings, and equipment should be higher priorities than television. One outspoken critic of the government's attempt to use television for education and development is the former leader of the Lok Dal opposition party, George Fernandez.
I keep giving statistics of the number of primary schools we have and the kind of problems that these schools have. You don't have blackboards, you don't have drinking water, you don't have teachers. There are 3,000 schools in the country at this moment without teachers. I was in Indravilli in Andhra Pradesh day before yesterday. I asked the Gonds, are there schools in your villages? And they don't have. And one young man came up and said, the teacher in my school died 5 months back. Since then, there is no school. So against the backdrop of that, where exactly are you going to fit the TV? In any case, where is electricity in the rural areas to take your TV? You don't have electricity for the pumps. Are you going to take electricity to, are you going to install television sets and provide them with electricity? The whole thing is absurd. It's not going to work in this country.
Only a small percentage of Indian villages have electricity, generally those near the roads and larger towns. In villages around Manikonda, television sets have broken down, and resources for maintenance are inadequate. Manikonda is therefore fortunate in having both electricity and a television that works. In villages like Manikonda, INSAT beams down adult education programs from noon to 1 p.m. each day. Some of the programs are made abroad, in the United States, France, and the United Kingdom. 1/3 will be produced by India's own universities. These programs are aimed at combating illiteracy, improving living conditions, and spreading the word about development. The government maintains that this will narrow the information gap between urban and rural areas.
Now, through TV, we can have a higher level of education. We can bring to the rural community programs for the farmers, for the rural women, for artisans, and so on. And above all, give them information. Our people also need to know about health problems, sanitation, cleanliness, the unity of the country, the diversity of the country, things which will help to keep them together and give them a sense of national oneness, as well as a desire to participate in all aspects of national life and to do whatever they can for themselves.
That then is the hope. But what is the reality? Is it naive to believe that television can help alleviate so widespread and intractable a problem as poverty in India? This Manikonda family survives by making beedis, crude cigarettes.
9 రూపాయల పని పొద్దున్న లేచి పొద్దు మూకిన దగ్గర 9 రూపాయలు పని చేస్తున్నాం. అది ఇంకా ఎక్కువ కావాలంటే కంపెనీకి పైసా కావాలి, కంపెనీ పెద్ద కావాలంటే కంపెనీకి పైసా కావాలి. వాళ్ళకి 4 పైసలు దొరుకుతాయి, మాకు 4 పైసలు దొరుకుతాయి. వాళ్ళకి పైసలు లేని మాకు ఎక్కడి నుండి తెచ్చిస్తారు. చాలా సరిపోవు మళ్ళీ యాదు ఊకునే బదులు ఏదైనా పని చేసుకున్నామంటే చేసుకుంటున్నాం.
This family sells the cigarettes at a low price to a middleman who markets them in town. Cooperatives do away with the middleman, but most villagers lack the knowledge to organize. Now educational television provides information on cooperatives. Unfortunately, the poorest villagers lack the necessary startup funds. The poorest of the poor are the Harijans, or untouchables, the lowest grouping in India's age-old caste system. In many places, they are still forced to live, eat, and pray outside of the village and can't even go to the well for water. The government has television programs telling the Harijans about loans that are exclusively available to them. The broadcasts are followed up by a visit from a field worker who brings the money to the village. The goal of these programs is to break through the isolation of the Harijans. But it is too soon to tell if the programs will have any impact on the caste system. Television also provides information on alternative fuels. Unfortunately, this information is not always relevant. In this village, alternative fuels are seldom available, so the people really have no options. They must continue to cut down firewood for cooking. The wood supply near this village is diminishing. In some areas, villagers travel for days just to collect enough wood for 1 week. Clean water is another scarce resource. 70% of the available water in India is polluted and a major source of ill health. Although television provides information about hygiene, nutrition, and family planning, most villages do not have modern healthcare facilities. Some, like Manakonda, have small primary health centers, but the village health worker has no real training and few medicines. The nearest hospital or doctor is half a day's walk. It is another example of how educational television needs to be backed up by material resources. Village life revolves around agriculture, and this farmer finds educational programs useful.
ఆ పిండి సన్నగా పిండి ఇట్లా పోస్తాం. పోస్తే ఏం చేస్తుందంటే ఎన్ను పెద్ద పెద్దగా ఇడుస్తుంది. పంట మాత్రం ఆరోగ్యంగా బాగా పండుతుంది. 4 సంచులు పండేతోటి 10 సంచులు పండుతుంది. ఇది ఇట్లా జొన్న, వరి తొలుత మేము ఏం చేస్తామంటే తొలుతాం, 1 సాలి 2 సార్లు దున్నుతాం. దున్ని మడేస్తాం. దాన్ని మడేసిన తర్వాత 2 సార్లు కొట్టి ఏం చేస్తామంటే మొత్తం పిండి చల్లుతాం. అడుగు పిండి చల్లిన తర్వాత మొలక నాటేస్తాం.
For those who can afford fertilizer and own land, the information beamed from INSAT has proved valuable. But 9 out of 10 villagers do not own land and have no capital. Most earn a meager and insecure living as day laborers. The problem remains that those who need help the most are still the least able to make use of the information provided by INSAT.
Communication can do a great deal, but it cannot really have substantial meaning unless we can tie in with the agencies that are in the field to deliver the physical goods that are required. If one is doing a campaign on health, one has to make sure that the infrastructure is there to support what we are doing.
Television, of course, is not a panacea. Or communication is not enough by itself. When you communicate, you are only supplying one part of interaction. The proper interaction has to involve transactions, various other things, extension work, other type of information. So it only facilitates that. By itself, it's clearly never going to be enough.
If one is to take care of immediate problems, it can be done in the short term. I mean, the question is, for example, if there's no water in the village, why do you want a television set? This is true, but it's not one against the other, because if one is to just provide water, it's like giving charity, and the thing ends there. If you want to build up a self-sustaining, self-dependent development, I think communication is very necessary to enable people to reach some kind of higher level of both knowledge and aspiration.
Programs shown in Manakonda are transmitted from Delhi via Insat. By contrast, people in the Kheda district receive locally produced programs. In charge of Kheda's production facility is Kiran Karnik.
Decentralized television is absolutely essential when one talks of using television for development. Most of the problems related to development are to be dealt with at the local level. Take a simple example like a health problem, an epidemic that suddenly breaks out, or a sudden change in the weather pattern, unexpected storm. Now, if the medium is to play some role in trying to alleviate these problems, then it has to be dealing with these very local problems. You cannot have a program that is all-encompassing and useful to everybody. It will not have the kind of impact that a local program dealing with local and immediate problems can have.
Locally produced programs have been transmitted to villages in the Kheda district since 1976. Programs are beamed not by satellite, but direct from a local transmitter. Kheda is a direct descendant of the Site Pilot Project and is an experiment in decentralized broadcast television. In this small studio, villagers participate in making simple, relevant programs of their own.
Firstly, we have a very well-defined target audience. Secondly, we've made sure that this audience that we have has access to the medium by making sure there are community sets in these villages. And thirdly, we have a system where we try and involve the audience and get feedback from them on what's happening, so we're able to keep the programs in tune with what their needs are.
The Kheda Project produces both news and educational programs. This show is a popular weekly drama, a kind of soap opera. Firmly rooted in the villager's own experience, the program conveys information about specific local problems. In this episode, a middle-class doctor from the city is finding it difficult to understand the village way of life.
રેવાબેન, તમારો દીકરો છેલ્લા 5 દિવસથી માદો છે અને તમે મને આજે ખબર આપી? અરે માદો પડ્યો કે તરત મને જણાવ્યો તો તરત જ સારવાર થઈ શકી હોત ને.
માંદો પડ્યો એને બીજે દિવસે પેલા સામે ગામે દવાખાનું છે ને ત્યાં લઈ ગયા હતા. ડોક્ટરે તપાસ કીધી અને કહ્યું કે કમળો છે.
ના ભાઈ, આ કમળો છે એવી ખબર પડી ને એટલે તરત જ અમે છે ને પેલા અમારા બુધાભાઈ ખરા ને એ બુધાભાઈને કયો એને લઈ ગયા ને બુધાભાઈ છે ને તે કમળો ઊંઝે છે. 3 દાડા સલંગ એને કમળો ઊંઝાયો પણ કઈ ફેર પડ્યો નહીં ભાઈ.
With all the Kheda programs, care is taken to link up with agencies working in the field. In this case, the Ministry of Health. Similar programs have been produced in conjunction with the Ministry of Languages and the Family Planning Association. Kheda provides the villages an hour and a half of programming a day. In addition, the district receives national programs via Insat. There are 500 government sets and 2,000 private sets that now serve Kheda's 5 million people. Another Kheda program is produced in cooperation with the Department of Agriculture. It provides information about the care of livestock. Shows have been produced to teach methods of animal husbandry, including vaccination, artificial insemination, and the feeding of cattle.
ઘણા મોટા પ્રમાણમાં પ્રોટીન, કાર્બોદિત પદાર્થ તેમજ ખનિજ તત્વોનું શોષણ થઈ જાય છે. ઉપરાંત જ્યારે જાનવર
This is the Amul Milk Farmers Cooperative in the Kheda district. Amul is collectively owned by 100,000 farmers. The cooperative owns its own dairy and provides most of the milk and cheese for Bombay. The Amul cooperative recently reported higher milk yields and healthier livestock. Proponents of the Kheda project believe that the local television programs have in part been responsible. These villagers have gathered to discuss such television programs. The feedback that they provide to CADA researchers is a vital part of the project.
ઘણા જ કામો કર્યા છે ટેલી ક્લબે જેવા કે આંગણવાડીનું કામ કર્યું છે પછી ગામમાં એક શ્રમ શિબિર યોજી હતી તેનાથી ગામમાં ઘણા જ સુધારા કર્યા છે ગામના રસ્તાઓ પહોળા કર્યા છે
શૈક્ષણિક રીતે આર્થિક સામાજિક રીતે જોઈએ તો અંધશ્રદ્ધા છે કુરિવાજો છે એમાં સુધારો જોવા મળે છે.
The research of the social scientists involved with the CADA project suggests that carefully planned relevant programs can play a useful role in development. But the dedication and achievements of this pioneering group have yet to be replicated on a national scale. Just as regional programs like CADA are proving their effectiveness, they may be facing growing competition. For a new era is dawning in Indian television. The new prosperity of the Indian middle class has led to a surging demand for urban commodities, specifically consumer electronics. Videocassette recorder sales are booming. Video shops and communal viewing halls are springing up in both cities and rural areas. The video boom began during the 1982 Asiad Games, the eastern counterpart to the Olympics. The government slashed import duties on VCRs, and a few domestic companies started manufacturing sets, so India's avid sports fans were able to buy videocassette players to record this momentous occasion. With 500,000 VCRs in home and communal use, video now reaches the masses with entertainment such as this Indian musical. Indian films frequently mix the language, styles, and traditions of India with those of the West. Here, a scene from Ram Ki Ganga, a movie released in 1984, is reminiscent of American musical comedy. But thematically, the film is Indian. Ram Ki Ganga is actually a religious story that upholds the ancient custom of arranged marriages. The recent video explosion is providing an outlet for imported films. American movies are increasingly popular. But most of the features still come from India's own filmmaking industry, the largest in the world. Bombay, the Hollywood of India, produces more than 200 films a year, including many that will be beamed via INSAT into villages. In 1984, India's film industry turned out 763 films, investing $20 billion. The film industry depends largely on revenue from trendy, low-budget films. The Indian high art films seen in the West are not blockbusters in India. Producers do continue to make films that reflect the unique heritage of the country, and an increasing number are releasing features that raise social or political issues, ranging from police brutality to the ancient dowry system. But the vast majority of India's films are fantasies, violent adventure stories, musicals, and romance. There has been much debate in the Indian press about the effect of the encroaching video boom and the increased use of INSAT to broadcast feature films. These flashy offerings are already competing with educational programs for viewers' attention. Some critics fear that the TV's educational use will be overshadowed by the demand for entertaining programs. Because the most popular films portray a westernized and urbanized lifestyle, there is concern that Indian traditions and cultural diversity may be threatened.
The Indian film does not try to relate itself to the reality of India. The commercial films which Bombay or other centers of film production put out in this country try to tell the Indian people that life is beautiful, but they go a step beyond that. And the step beyond is that whereas the cultural values which films in the West present are by and large rooted in the situations that prevail there, in our case they again try to put across cultural values and economic ideas which are not related to people's lives and which then create false impressions and certain urges and demands which cannot be fulfilled.
In the villages of rural India, televised feature films draw audiences from miles around. 2 or more Indian films are screened every week. The musical is a favorite. In Manakonda, audiences for these screenings often exceed 500 people, a third of the village, all gathered by the one community TV set. Television programs also introduce them to a world of different values.
Rich, creamy milkmaid. You can do wonders with it. Try eggless cake. So simple to make. Super coconut laddus in no time. A fruity feast instantly. And there's more.
Look for the exciting recipes on the milkmaid labels. Try a new delicious dish every time, anytime.
Manakonda has become part of the global village, and in so doing has joined the Consumer Society.
Served with the exciting freshness of limes.
Television is going to create in India a situation where the whole value system is going to change. It's trying to sell products which are not within the reach of the worker, which are not within the reach of the ordinary man. You are taking TV into every home, the rich and the poor. You are trying to cater to the rich and at the same time tantalize the poor with items that are just not available to them. You are destroying them. You are destroying them both in terms of values, and you are creating a situation in which the poor will then have to find ways and means of acquiring those things which they are told are very necessary for them, but which are beyond their reach.
There are 2 television channels in India, both government-owned. One channel transmits mostly educational programs in 6 different languages. The other broadcasts movies and national news in prime time and allows commercials.
Hello Egg Shampoo, protein युक्त पोषण. नया हेलो ग्रीन एप्पल शैम्पू, ताजी मनमोहक खुशबू. नया हेलो हर्बल शैम्पू, जड़ी बूटियों के गुणों से भरपूर. बालों में रौनक रेशम सा बना.
Some of the programs watched here may come as a bit of a surprise.
I Love Lucy, starring Lucille Ball and Bessie Arnett.
Besides American shows, British dramas, documentaries, soap operas, and sporting events are shown.
with 300 miles of rough road behind them, the leaders were pulling clear.
Programs imported from the West now comprise more than 10% of the weekly TV schedule. Many programs seen throughout the country are in languages rural people don't speak. English and Hindi are spoken on all programs transmitted after 8 p.m. Yet English is understood by less than 3% of the population, and even Hindi by only 40%. In a country with a diverse cultural heritage, television's use of a predominant language is a consequence of a centralized network. Uniformity could help bring together a people divided by religion, geography, and class. But there is concern that non-Hindi speaking villagers will be denied access not only to the entertainment, but also to the educational value of television. Further, it is feared that the regional languages and customs not shown on television will ultimately fade away. Will television unify India at the cost of its cultural diversity?
India is a country of many cultures. The tribal culture, what's relevant in the north is not relevant in the south. Music, song, dance of each area, of each region, of each people differs. What we are now going to do through the satellite system is to give it to the people something that is not indigenous, something that does not belong to them. And in the process, try to shake their own confidence in their own values and give them nothing new in return except something that is synthetic.
Television can counterbalance that, can balance that to some extent by projecting regional cultures and by convincing the people that what they're doing is really a good thing, that it's not something to be sneered at, it's not something that's less than the city culture.
Critics always doubted Mrs. Gandhi's promise to use INSAT to educate and address the needs of her culturally diverse country. The government owns and controls the Indian Broadcasting Service, Doordarshan as it's called. Her critics accused Mrs. Gandhi of using television as a vehicle for self-promotion, in particular by keeping a tight rein on television news. The government-owned broadcasting service airs half a dozen 10 to 15-minute news reports a day. The reports consist mostly of commentators reading national news because the news organizations are still too ill-equipped to provide much on-location regional coverage. The news is presented in either English or Hindi. Individual news stories are not necessarily read in both languages. Over the years, members of parliament and the national press have called for the state to hand broadcasting over to an autonomous body. Thus far, the government has resisted. Mrs. Gandhi defended the government's monopoly on broadcasting, saying it was necessary to ensure the balance between entertainment and educational programming, vital to a developing country. India is the world's largest democracy, and the implications of total government control over a powerful news medium are sobering.
Most media, electronic media particularly in this country, has been in the hands of the government. And the government, through whatever bureaucratic or political network it operates, has tried to centralize authority. Now, what's now going to happen insofar as INSAT is concerned is that you will now be able to reach out to people in one shot, put across ideas in one shot, sitting here in Delhi.
The Indian broadcast system faces a dilemma. For the most part, it is located in the city and influenced by the middle class. This new urban elite wants more entertainment and has less need for educational programs. But catering to these tastes will not fulfill the government's commitment to use television as a tool for development. Indian television has reached a crossroads. Critics argue that control of INSAT's broadcast schedule must become more decentralized. Both politically and culturally, it must meet the needs of all of India.
I think over-centralization would lead to very inefficient use of the medium because nobody has all the wisdom. And in fact, it may lead to homogenization, and in some sense you may say it can lead to indoctrination, not in political sense necessarily, but indoctrination with values which pertain to only one center. And that is not interaction. If we have to have development, we have to have interaction. And in order to have interaction, it's necessary that origination of ideas, images, programs should take place in many, many places. So decentralization is absolutely essential if the programs, if the whole effort has to be towards development.
It depends on how it is decentralized and what use is made of it. Because if by decentralizing the tendency is to create a divisive attitude, and that would not be good because we have to keep national unity in view all the time.
In making all these programs, it is absolutely essential that the inputs, that the access to the medium is provided by the potential beneficiaries. Otherwise, it just becomes propagandizing or it becomes sermons. So it has to be a live thing. Everybody can't have a microphone in front of him, but on the other hand, he should have an access to be able to get to the medium so that the medium becomes an interaction.
Still in its infancy, INSAT took 20 years to become a reality. Now there are more than 30 million television sets in India, and the number is steadily growing. INSAT was a major technological feat linked to a philosophical commitment to development. As a microcosm of the impact of technology on the Third World, India's experience with INSAT will be carefully watched.
It is not necessary that space technology should lead to increase of inequalities. However, if it's not properly used, it could be. There is a lot of discussion going on in India as to how to use the new technology, but I am exceedingly optimistic. A country which took the courage to do a massive experiment like SITE before anybody else had done such an experiment anywhere else, and which went on to then have an INSAT with a commitment for using communication for social purposes, I think the discussion is definitely going to lead to a direction which will be beneficial and which will go in the right direction.
There will be further concentration of political power in the hands of the urban elite as the satellite programs start reaching out to the people. There will be an effort made to condition people's minds around individuals, around parties, around leaders, and around an elitist order. And at the same time, an attempt made to numb their conscience. Nobody is going to discuss to them about what is happening in Indravelli, where 100-odd Gonds were massacred. Nobody is going to tell them why it is necessary to organize themselves and assert their authority, assert their power, assert their own democratic rights. Nobody is going to discuss this. It is not being discussed today on Indian television or on Indian radio, and it is not going to be discussed tomorrow.
Holistic use of communication is what I would like to see. That we should not differentiate communication, broadcasting, telecommunication from educational activity, health activity, agricultural extension, and so on. Every time we want to do a new thing, we put a new structure out there. Education people have nothing to do whatsoever with agriculture extension people or health people. Health has nothing to do with social problems. And broadcasting has nothing whatever to do with all this. Unless we mix all these and say that this is one way of people getting together with each other, getting in touch with each other, transferring information, unless we begin to do that, we are not going to make proper use of the new opportunities.
On October 31st, 1984, Indira Gandhi was assassinated. Television provided the means for millions throughout the country to watch her funeral. Mrs. Gandhi had pledged to bring about a new social order through mass communication. She promised to use the new communication technologies to further India's development. Television is her legacy. Now, as a new political era begins, it remains to be seen whether the promise will be fulfilled.